And now the people are paying the price. Food lines have to be guarded by soldiers, and they tell the story of the world's worst performing economy with inflation over 800%. But when you talk to the people here, there is no denying the crisis is real. Food shortages pushing some people to ransack food trucks.
No comen, expresan que están agotados porque ese día se pararon en la madrugada con su mamá a ir a hacer cola, no se concentran en las actividades, ya sea por hambre, fatiga.
¿Cuánto hace que no tomas leche?
So they can stand in lines like these, hoping to buy the staples they need for their own children at a much cheaper government-subsidized price. Sometimes they have to wait for hours and get nothing at all.
Que el dinero no me alcanza ni para comprarle al niño, nada. Puedo gastar 4.000 bolívares en 200 gramos, 100 gramos, algo así. Es lo que puedo gastar. No comemos como tenemos que comer, pero algo tenemos en la mesa. Así sea un pan con mantequilla o una arepa sola, pero la tenemos pues.
In this chaos, the only thing thriving is the black market. Scenes like this play out every day. People illegally buying products intended for the food lines right out of a government warehouse. And it's not just food. The death toll here is on the rise due to shortages of medicine and basic supplies. This clinic director tells us she can only treat the most basic of ailments. Headaches, stomach aches, that's it. There are no antibiotics.
Nada.
No hay
Nada
antibiótico.
de antibiótico.
¿Desde hace cuánto que no tiene?
Por año y medio más o menos.
Ni un antibiótico.
Ni un antibiótico. Ni siquiera inyectado.
In the capital, there's a queue for everything, everywhere. Hunger breeds a special kind of anger.
This is how hyperinflation works. These groceries cost $50 now, but because of what's happening with the local currency, they'll be worth double at least by next month. People paying tomorrow's prices today.
There's no queuing for the youngest, living off what, even here, nobody wants. This isn't play, it's practice for self-defense. My brother got killed in July by another gang, says 14-year-old Usmaria. They found the body in the river. We gather stuff, we beg a piece of chicken skin to take home. In the socialist utopia that now leaves nearly every stomach empty. That's all she has to feed for this day. This isn't political, it's survival. People are killing each other for a kilo of rice, for water. I get $1.50 every month, promptly, enough for one chicken and a food box from the barracks. Then we have to work magic to make it last like everyone else. Everyone else walks zombie-like, further and closer towards starvation. Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, Caracas.
Compré cambures, compré lechosa y compré un pimentón. Esto me costó 1.600 bolívares.
Me dieron una leche, 1 kilo de caraotas, un aceite, 2 kilos de harina pan, 2 kilos de arroz y un jugo de guayaba. Esto después de anotarnos en una lista hace 3 semanas, donde nos censaron los hábitos de mi familia, censaron cuántas habitaciones había en mi casa, cuántos baños, cuántas personas vivían en ella. Y a las 3 semanas entonces nos llega nuestra bolsa solidaria. Obviamente esto tiene que durar un mes.
Aquí en esta bolsa, mire, me enfoque la bolsa, para que no embuste, mire. Esto es, mire, recorte de pescado que está comiendo la gente, miren, cabeza de pescado, miren. Esto es lo que está comiendo el pueblo. Esto es lo que está comiendo el pueblo, porque la carne y eso, el pollo, se lo comen solo los socialistas. Mire, esto está comiendo el pueblo, mire. Mire los huecos que he tenido que hacerle 10 huecos para poder, mire. Mira como yo de gordo, Mire cuántos huecos le he echado a la correa. La dieta de Maduro.
Hey, stop! That's enough!
The end of the line for the toilet paper and paper towels is here. Did you hear me echo? That was cool. The end of the line for the toilet paper and paper towels is right here. Yeah.
I got him. I got it.
It is cooperating with police. Was that a head of lettuce? Did I see a head of lettuce?
With a 15-year-old.
Here goes. Is that a head of lettuce? What is this?
Why do I want to get in on this so bad?
Oh, wow.
Inbound trains, next L in 4 minutes, M in 18 minutes, T in 11 minutes.
Here we are, Castro, fucking empty as hell, but here we are. See how train's looking today. Taking the L down to Terraval outbound. Yeah, again, super empty. I've only seen one other person with me down here, and it looks like the train's also pretty empty too. Look at that. Nobody.
So this isn't the first time I've gone through something like this. This is very familiar to me. This is very, this strikes very close to home. This strikes very near and dear to the heart, because this whole health crisis that we're going through around the world. To a certain degree, I've faced similar aspects of this crisis back when I moved and lived in Venezuela for between my 8th grade and high school years. So that would be between around December of 2011 to around May, June-ish of 2016. In Venezuela, for those who aren't aware, the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela has been going on for quite some time, a little bit before I arrived in Venezuela, and has been going on till today. Just to give you an idea of what's going on there, there's very little food. Grocery stores are nearly always empty, rationing food constantly. Government mandated food packages that are supposed to last you a month that only are offered to people who are part of the Socialist Party. Rampant crime, no basic necessities, no basic supplies, things like toilet paper, toothpaste, deodorant, things like that. No access to hot water or clean water for weeks and months at a time. Not being able to leave your house, not because of a quarantine like we do here, but not being able to leave your house because of safety, because you might get mugged, killed, or kidnapped. Once again, this is just very familiar to me. So back when I moved in 2011, the current president at the time was Presidente Hugo Chavez, who has been in power in Venezuela from around 1996, 1997, give or take. And he changed the constitution 3 or 4 times to make sure he was able to maintain his power in Venezuela. Because he wanted to start this whole new socialist communist revolution in Venezuela, solely focused on the people, quote unquote. And for a time being, that did work. The government had focused all of its economy on social work, social projects, and focusing their only means of growth on oil, which is the main export of Venezuela, because Venezuela has one of the largest oil reserves in the world. However, when I arrived initially into Venezuela, around 1 or 2 years later, the Presidente Hugo Chavez died of cancer, and his right-hand man, I'm not going to say president because he's not, Nicolás Maduro, took over power in Venezuela. Now, to give you a little bit of background of President Nicolás Maduro, he doesn't really have a background. He has never worked in government. He's never really done anything. Before he was picked to be the right-hand man of Hugo Chavez, because he was a man of the people, Nicolás Maduro was a bus driver. And not to say there's anything wrong with a bus driver. However, as you can see with characters that are put into power, such as the president we have in the United States, things tend to go badly. So in Venezuela, Presidente Nicolás Maduro took over power, and from then it started going to hell, to put it in light terms. The economy essentially crashed. Inflation rate flew through the roof, more so than any country in the world. For quite some time, at least during my stay in Venezuela, Caracas, along with 3 other cities, were part of the top 10 most dangerous cities in the world in terms of murder rate. Caracas, where I used to live, being the number 1. And with this in mind, you still had this humanitarian crisis going on. So you had mothers, children, families, the elderly, going to grocery stores around 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, halfway across the city, waiting in lines around 5 or 6 hours to have the chance to potentially get something. Now, there wasn't any security in that you would get something, and so it was mainly first come, first serve. So that's where rationing came in and kind of helped out with people. But even with rationing, there was still very little access to milk. Only powdered milk, really, if Venezuela got shipments of powdered milk, because the government refused to get any sort of help from outside forces, because he considered anyone outside of Venezuela, except for places like Russia and China, to be part of the empire that's trying to turn or convert the Venezuelan people against themselves. And with these people going out in the grocery stores, murder, killings, kidnappings were commonplace. And for quite some time, we weren't allowed to go outside. It's not that we weren't allowed to go outside, it's we just didn't go outside. because we couldn't. What were we going to do? What were me and my family going to do? Just wait in line to potentially get killed? Where, especially me and my family, we had a very large target on our back, especially me, because in Venezuela, I was considered the outcast of sorts. I was very much out of place. Amongst the population of Venezuela, there was basically very little to no white people, fewer with red hair, and fewer that were tall. I had all three. So going out in general always painted a target on my back, and that's not something we were going to risk. So staying inside was essentially commonplace for around 6 years of my life. Staying inside, staying indoors, not being able to leave the home, things like that for a long time, actually, for around 1 or 2 years. Schooling was fairly similar as well. We actually weren't able to go to school. So this online school that we're facing nowadays is also something very familiar to me. Back in around, I want to say, 2013, give or take, our school in Venezuela implemented something called virtual school, nowhere near as sophisticated as it is now, but we basically typed through Google Chat and turned in homework through there. So this whole virtual school, this whole online classing thing is not very unfamiliar to me, and this self-quarantining and staying inside also is not very unfamiliar to me, because I have lived through it, I've been through it, and I'm still here. And let me just say, it's not the end of the world. And the one thing that kept me going through those 6 years of hell, I like to put it, is hope. Hope is what kept me going. And it's not forever. People are making it seem that this is going to be a permanent thing, and it's not. Neither was my situation in Venezuela, neither is this going to be the situation here. It's not going to be permanent. We just have to take care of ourselves and be mindful of others and mindful of ourselves and take care of ourselves. That's the only thing we can really do. Because this is something I learned in Venezuela. There are certain things in life you can't control, and there's no point in worrying about it or focusing on it, because at the end of the day, they're out of your control and there's nothing really you can do about it. But there are things you can control: your health, your mental health, your safety, those around you, things of that nature. Those things you can very much take care of, and with that, you'll be able to become a better person and get out of this better than you were originally. Food shortages in Venezuela were also fairly similar to what we're seeing today. The food shortages in Venezuela are fairly similar to what we're seeing today. Empty grocery stores, long lines, rationing of essential goods, things of that nature. In Venezuela, however, when the rationing was taking place, they were rationing a very, very small portion of goods, because oftentimes, because of how corrupt the country was, grocery stores, government officials, things of people in positions of power, they would negotiate with grocery store owners and pass on physical goods to people outside of the grocery store, usually part of the Socialist Party. And those people that would receive the goods would sell the goods back to the people at around 4 or 5 times the price. In Venezuela, we call those bachaqueros. Here we call them hoarders. So again, this whole hoarding situation is not very new to me. I've seen it before, and it's all stems from panic. People start panic buying. People start going crazy that there's going to be the end of the world. They're not going to know what to do. And things turn out to be a mess. For the first couple of years in Venezuela, things were a mess. Things were crazy. We limiting ourselves to 2 meals a day, if 2 meals. Having to ration our bathing times, having to ration the amount of stuff we drank, things like coffee, which were considered essentials to me personally and to Venezuelans alike, limiting it to 1 pot a day. Things of that nature, no snacking, trying to maintain the fruits and vegetables for as long as possible. And it gets to the point where, as we're seeing now, where with hoarders, all that food is wasted. And with that food wasted, there's the potential of further damage being done. And there's the potential of the people who needed that food in the first place, of them being in serious risk. There are mothers out there with newborn children in this health crisis that don't have access to wet wipes or don't have access to distilled or clean water because of hoarders panic buying everything. when I went to the grocery store, I've never really seen anyone ever have to buy 18 packs of toilet paper. It simply doesn't make sense. And if you calculate that mathematically, there's no way you could ever use that in a lifetime, let alone in a couple months. So this whole process of hoarding really isn't doing anyone any favors. Neither did it do anyone favors in Venezuela, and it just led to further chaos and further problems. And on top of that, luckily we do have the police system here, and we do have a sense of law and order. In Venezuela, that's not the case. People really just don't they don't care. They threw the rules out the window. There would be rampaging in the streets, people breaking through the doors, stealing everything they can from the grocery stores, people pushing over delivery trucks, stopping delivery trucks and stealing from them, people blatantly stealing from the weak and fragile for their own needs. And at the end of the day, it didn't really do anyone favors. It just ended up making the whole situation worse. And I'm afraid that the situation here is looking fairly similar. At the start of this whole crisis, you saw people panic buying. That'll happen in Venezuela, and it still happens. You saw people going crazy, fighting over food. That happened in Venezuela. It still happens now. I've yet to see civil unrest. However, I do have a feeling with the way the president is managing the situation, as well as the rest of the powers around the world, that civil unrest is bound to happen. Maybe not now, but maybe once the crisis ends. I foresee that happening. People not staying inside and protecting themselves, that's happening now, and I saw that in Venezuela too. Taking unnecessary risks and not taking enough precautions happened in Venezuela. I'm seeing that here too. There's a lot of similarities between these two places, and funnily enough, they're millions of miles away from each other, and they're completely different political backgrounds and completely different economic backgrounds. Hell, they're even completely different countries. One of them is considered a third world country. Personally, it's a terrible joke. I like to consider Venezuela a fourth world country, and the United States is supposed to be a first world country. However, in Venezuela, when this whole crisis started, there was no medicine. There's no way to take care of people. There was no way to tend to the ill. A majority of the time, people had to buy their own supplies to bring to the hospital so the hospital could take care of themselves. We're seeing a similar situation happening here. People are stealing N95 masks. There aren't enough supplies to tend to the weak and wounded. There are not enough supplies not enough ventilators to take care of those in need. And you see tons and tons of people just not having enough supplies. And as a first world country, you would think that we would be prepared for such a scenario, that you would be prepared for this pandemic, have enough supplies, have enough order, have enough structure. But like in Venezuela, there was no structure. You had to live it day by day and wait to hear what the news was. That's something else I learned in Venezuela, that the news tend to be very alarmistic and very useless, that it tend to make you more fearful and more scared of the situation, instead of doing stuff that was right and actually considering what to do with your own well-being and your own health. Back in Venezuela,